Hey everybody, and welcome to week 6 of EDU6550. I just saw about 5 of you last night in our data chat. I'll see the rest of you on Sunday for the last data chat in our course this summer. And like I said, for weeks now, it's almost over. I can't believe it. Our teachers actually come back next week, next Friday on the 2nd, and kids come back August 12th. I mean, this is the fastest summer I can remember, and I worked the whole thing. So that's normally not the case when I work. It goes by very slowly. Vacation last year went very fast. But what I want to do tonight in this chat with you guys, or this video for you guys, is 3 things. I want to, number 1, go over the course outline for the remainder of what's happening. I want to make sure you're very clear on that piece. Number 2, I'm going to talk about the remaining chapters in DataWise and Leverage Leadership. That's chapters 5 through 10 in DataWise, and then 2, 3, and 7 in Leverage Leadership. And last but not least, we're going to talk about the final exam and getting all your assignments submitted on time. So let me start first with the syllabus, and if you got that in front of you and you want to follow along with me, I'm going to start in week 6 where we are. And number 1, you're reading chapter 8 in Leverage Leadership, chapter 8 in DataWise and chapter 3 in Leverage Leadership. I had those backwards. You're going to do those 2 this week, and you've got the week 6 discussion forum. Now, you guys have been fantastic about getting those discussion posts in. So again, initial post by Monday, and then your response post by Wednesday of next week. And this is the last discussion forum of our course as well. So you've got this one done and out of the way. There's no discussion forum in week number 7. Number 2 assignment is a data chat. And obviously, several of you, 5 of you were there last night. The other 8 of you I will see on Sunday for the last data chat, week number 6. And don't forget, on all 4 data chats, here comes Oliver. And he ran right by. Oh. We feed the cats in the neighborhood on the porch, and I think he's watching them eat right now. Yep, he's watching them eat right now. I see him staring at them. That's kind of funny. Sorry, guys. Little sidestep there on that piece. Don't forget, most of you done it already, but you need a summary from each of the 4 data chats. Summary from each of the 4 data chats. So that is a 1 to 2 paragraph summary of what you learned and how you're going to use it both as a teacher and a future administrator. So make sure you get those turned in. They are due by the end of the course. But again, don't wait. Get them done out of the way. The last assignment during week 6 is the data and assessment proposal. That is WCG number 5. And I've gone over that in previous videos. Do make sure when you turn this assignment in that you're giving me everything required for that assignment. And specifically on the data and assessment proposal, I want to make sure you refer to the rubric, because it's very specific about a couple things you got to make sure you do. You got to make sure you have 2 areas of need for your school. You got to address all those various areas that are listed in the next several sections, and there's no number of items. You just have to make sure you support them. So if an area of growth for you is bottom quartile in math, you got to support Y in each of those sections. And then last but not least, your proposal response form. And again, that's going to be done by your principal. You're going to get it to them to make sure they approve of your data assessment proposal. And most of you have been good about getting me that information to look at and have a look and make sure that it's doing okay for you guys. So that's WCG number 5, also due this week on Wednesday. All right. The next week, week number 7, you have only 1 assignment due. And week number 7's assignment is very simple. It is going to be the WCG number 4 assignment. And that is the Individual Leadership Development Plan, the ILDP. And for this, I think I advised you guys in the video to go ahead and do the ILDP at the website for WCG assignments, and then do the separate document for me that has the 4 areas with the 4 items for each area. That gives you 16 total. So make sure you've got that in there, and when you look at the rubric for WCG number 4, it talks very specifically about addressing those 4 strategies in each of those areas on the rubric, and then you're writing a 1-page reflection. And that reflection can, by the way, address both WCG's number 4 and 5. So for WCG number 4, you're turning in 3 things. The website piece, your document with the 16 items, 4 for each of the 4 areas, and your 1-page reflection. So make sure you got that in. Last but not least is the final exam, and that's on chapters 5 to 10 in DataWise and chapters 2, 3, and 7 Leverage Leadership. That will open up on the 5th of August and close on the 8th. So shorter window on this one, but again, you have the same 4 hours, and I'll talk about it a little bit more later on in this chat. I want to now focus your attention on data-wise. And we're going to look at data-wise first, chapters 5 through 10. And in Chapter 5, they talk about a lot of what we've done the last couple data chats, if you haven't realized that already. They talk about linking, learning, and teaching. They talk about looking at your practice and observing what's going on in practice, of looking at what kinds of resources you have available, and really looking at your own practice and seeing if what you're doing is effective or not. Now, this can be good both as a leader and as a teacher, because we have to continually look back at things that we've done and evaluate whether or not they are effective with kids. If scores are not showing that, if kids are not learning, then part of it could be our practice, and we have to address that piece. Chapter 6 comes right out of that, developing an action plan and talking about an instructional strategy. And what a great time for me to talk about this with you. I met with 3 or 4 schools this week, 3 or 4 next week, talking about their action plan, their instructional focus areas for this next school year, and looking at what classrooms should look like. What do you want to see? We call them look-fors in Hillsborough. It's a very common term other people use as well. What are the things you want to see? And so we met today with our area principals and our area superintendent, because we have, like I said, 60 schools. She said her goal this year is to make sure everybody has a common set of look-fors in every classroom. It doesn't matter what content you're teaching, it doesn't matter what grade you're teaching. As long as you've got that, that's how it's going to be there. And again, have that piece in writing. The next piece, number 7, we talked about this, chapter 7, in both discussion week number 5 and week number 6, talking about assessing progress. It's ironic we talk about this because one of my highest performing schools in my neighborhood, in fact, where my neighborhood kids go to school, they asked me to come do a piece on assessment. And not just assessment at the end of the unit, but those ongoing formal and informal formative assessments. Now remember, there's 2 terms here in assessment, formative and summative. Formative is all about things that get to see how you're doing. Summative, how you did. And so we've got to combine both things in there, and this talks about both short-term data, medium-term data, and long-term data. Now your long-term data is what we're doing here in week number 6 discussion, the online video discussion. That's long-term data. What were the results? You're not changing them now. But one of the plans that this elementary school that we looked at will focus on to start the next school year is, when are they going to assess their kids throughout the year? When does their short-term data come in? What's their medium-term data? And how are they going to set learning goals for the year? Chapter 8, acting and assessing. Communication, communication, communication. Oh my gosh. Rant here. We, as district administrators, and sometimes even as school administrators, I'm speaking for my colleagues, do a horrible job of communicating with you guys, the teachers. We can't do that. We cannot do a horrible job of communicating with teachers. We have to have an action plan out there and talk about it. Now, those of you who came last night, we talked about that very important piece called and now I'm drawing a blank in the middle of the video. I told you guys I do these ad lib. I don't write anything down, because if I do, I'll be doing this the entire time reading to you, and you won't see my eyes. And you'll think I'm bored of doing this work. Root cause analysis. See, there it is, right in the top of my head, a root cause analysis. If you were there last night, we talked about it. If you weren't there last night, we're going to talk about it Sunday. Write that down. Root cause analysis. This is something you would do with your teachers with the goal of making sure they understand the reasons why you're doing what you're doing. Then you got to visit classrooms often. So one of the things I did this last week, and I'm doing again next week, I'm sitting with schools, and we use Microsoft's Office 365, and it comes with forms. Been helping schools set up forms they can do on their phone, walk in a classroom and collect data. And then they can sit at the faculty meeting and say, look, here's a chart. We walked in 80 classrooms, and only 20 of you were doing this. So obviously it's either A, not a priority, B, not working, or C, we're not doing it with fidelity. And therefore, that's a way to kind of monitor that progress. Then we got to look at and see if our kids are actually learning, and we always have to celebrate success. We have to celebrate success. Today, we talked about our A schools and our schools that raised their grade, and we're hoping our other schools can do the same kind of thing this next year. Chapter 9 talks about how the central office fits into things, and you guys in Polk and the other counties that are in this course, you have the same thing we have in Hillsborough. You have an assessment office, and their job is to really collect that data and get it out to the schools, talk about that data, how it works. Just as when we were in the law and ethics class, those of you who haven't had it yet, you'll get this with me this next fall. We talked about how there's district staff that support you when you have ESE questions, when you have legal ramification questions for employment. The same thing holds true for assessment. There's always a district office, and you got to make sure you reach out to them. That's chapter 9. And then chapter 10, I mean, honestly, it's this thing about improving. And I don't care what your school grade is, you can always improve. So the story in my community is there's 2 elementary schools that are right in my community. And my kids went to one of them, which has pretty much been the top performing school in the county since its inception. It's the top performing school every year. They went there for a year. Then they built a new one, and we got shifted to that school. And my kids went there for my son 3rd, 4th, 5th, my daughter 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th. And they've always been an A, but they've been behind the other school, which, by the way, my neighborhood now goes back to the other school. They shifted boundaries back. And they got a new principal. The principal has been there 15 years, retired. A new principal comes in. He's a buddy of mine. I've known him for years. And he says, Scott, we're catching that school. I can't tell you the name, but he says, we're catching that school. We're going to catch them this year. We're going to catch them next year. We're going to match them, and we're going to be better than them. And that really is this thing about a theory of action, of what your goal is and what your plan is. You can't adjust for demographics, but you can always improve in some area. Until you have 100% of your kids proficient and making learning gains, there's always room for improvement. And that's the big gist of chapter 10. All right, moving back now to the Leverage Leadership book, and this is chapter 2, Observation and Feedback, which feeds a lot into what we just talked about. Now, I gave you guys a great outline here, and I could spend the next 30 minutes talking about this outline, but I'm not going to do that because this video is already 12 minutes, and I still got to talk about the final. Big key in chapter 2. I want you to think of the term inquiry cycle. Inquiry cycle. We've talked about it a few times. Plan, do, check, act. PDCA. Plan, do, check, act. PDCA. Plan, do, check, act. I know you reminded that to see it again. This is the thing that we do very well as educators. We do great planning. We do great doing. We don't do a whole lot of checking or acting. And so one of the things that you have to do as an administrator is when you are observing teachers and you are collecting data, you have to be really good about having conversations and giving feedback. And there are 3 real big types of feedback you will give. You will give general broad feedback of your entire faculty. We just talked about that with the forms and the graphs and all that. 2, you will give informal, non-evaluative feedback. Hey, Johnny Jones, I really liked your lesson today. These were the good things. This is something that you can work on. Let's keep moving forward. Nothing formal. 3rd, the formal feedback, both at observation time and evaluation time. And so we have to get better because we're very good about number 3, but we're not so good about number 1 and number 2. That's what chapter 2 is all about. Chapter 3 talks about pitfalls of planning, and that's a really important term, pitfalls of planning. Haven't we talked for weeks now about planning ahead for things? Yes, very important, planning ahead. However, at times, you will find that you can overplan. So that's something you will learn throughout time, and there's 2 big questions that they're asking you in this chapter. Number 1, what do students need? And number 2, how can we get them there? If you follow your planning with those 2 questions, you can't go wrong. You can't go wrong because that's the piece you got to think about. And then they also talk about planning makes perfect at the end of that chapter. And finally, chapter 7 is talking about choosing leaders and figuring out people. And I want you to realize that there really are 3 types of teachers in your school. Type number 1 is the type that you guys are, the go-getters. I'm getting my master's degree. I'm going to be an administrator. I want some leadership roles. Gimme, 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 gimme. Very easy. They're hungry. Type number 2, I just want to be a teacher. But there are leadership roles for teachers as well. And sometimes we have to put teachers in leadership roles to make them successful. Finally, number 3, the thorn in your side, which is, I was doing that a little earlier, the thorn in your side. And those are the people that you have to keep your friends close, but your enemies closer. Those are people you want some of them on your ILT, your instructional leadership team. And if you weren't here last night, you'll hear it again on Sunday, instructional leadership team. You want them helping you plan, because if they're bought into it, because they helped decide it, then they can't come back and say, oh, I didn't say we could do that. Yeah, you did. Yeah, you did. You were there in that meeting, and I had you there. So these are some important things that they talk about, and they talk about training your team. And that was a big piece. Have those conversations. So I have a brand new principal at one of my high schools. I work with 5 high schools, and one of them is a brand new principal. He was the AP curriculum there for the last couple of years, and the principal had been there 14 years retired. So he's now on board, and he says, Scott, I want to start ILT in my school. So I'm going out there during pre-plan to meet with them. One of my middle schools, they're a C. They want to be a B. I'm going out to do a leadership team planning with them as well. So these are these really important things I want you guys thinking about. Now, the last piece of my chat tonight, and I got to go log into the portal. I'm sorry, I didn't have that ready, is the final exam. And I want to give you just a couple insights on that piece to make sure you are going to be ready when it does come time. Give me just 1 second. It's loading up here. How about a smile? All right, guys. Final exam opens on 8/5 and closes on 8/8. Very, very important that you get this done in a timely fashion. So there are 5 questions again, and I believe there's even like a bonus question. So that's pretty cool for you. So the questions talk about developing an assessment strategy with the piece I talked about tonight, the short, medium, and long-term data. So make sure you can address that piece. The second one area you want to look at is talking about your school being on the list for underperforming schools, and I want you to talk about how you're going to fix that piece. And again, make sure you answer everything I ask you for in the question. The effective feedback piece, we just talked about that in tonight's chat. It's all outlined for you in leadership, leverage leadership. The 6 steps to effective feedback are going to be on that final exam. Talking about a leadership team to help drive what you're going to do. So a plan for that piece is a big piece in this. And then last but not least is the most important thing you've learned and how you'll use it in your current role. So not about when you become administrator, what you're doing now as a teacher. So that's the last question on there. That's it. That's it. I mean, the course is almost over. I may do a video next week to kind of say goodbye to you guys. But overall, we are done, guys. We're at that point. So make sure you get your work turned in. That's due for this next week. And then I'll be back and with emails over the weekend. And I'll see some of you guys on Sunday night.